Hi, I'm James Shillinglaw, and I'm here with Chris Allison, who's head of commercial partnerships for the Americas for Tourism Australia. And obviously, right now, we can't go to Australia because it's closed out and we got some problems over here. But Tourism Australia has actually recently put out some trends and some sort of projected travel and sort of get you dreaming about travel to Australia. And we wanted to talk to Chris about that and a whole lot more. And you're going to find out about all that on Insider Travel Report. First of all, how are you and where are you is what we've always been asking people. And you're not where you are appearing, as we know.
I certainly wish I was where my background is right now. But James, thanks for having me, and thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk to your readers and viewers about some of the trends that we've been thinking about over the last couple of months. I'm based in Los Angeles. I live in the southern part of LA in Hermosa Beach. So lucky to be by the beach and lucky to have predominantly nice weather that we can enjoy outside during this time. But as I'm sure everyone knows, it's been an interesting time here in California from a pandemic perspective. But I think everyone was relieved yesterday when the governor announced some rolling back of the restrictions, and we'll be able to get back to outdoor dining from this weekend and back into our gyms and things, which is going to be good for everyone.
Now, when is the last time you were in Australia?
It was actually almost 12 months ago. So I was down there the last week of February. So I think I got back into the US on March 8th, and then our borders closed on March 12th. So kind of snuck a trip in. I was down there for work, so spent all of that time in Sydney, actually, in our head office and things. So yeah, it was nice to be down there at that time. But it just seems like such a lifetime ago now with everything that's happened.
It was, and I think we were talking earlier, the last I was in Australia a little less than 2 years ago, and I really had a wonderful time, and was looking forward to getting back there. But let's talk about the situation right in Australia right now. Is it really closed to all visitors because of the pandemic, or are there ways people can travel to the country with testing and quarantines?
Yeah. So right now the international borders are closed for all travellers to Australia. I think the government took a very aggressive and protective stance initially and closed the borders really quickly, and they still remain closed. The government's very focused on making sure there's pathways for Australian residents to continue to return to Australia. So our focus is ensuring that folks can come back to the country that want to, that have the right to live and work there. So that's a big focus. So that's kind of the only pathway at the moment. We are working on a couple of travel bubbles at the moment. So I'm sure everyone has heard about the upcoming travel bubble with New Zealand. So back in October, we actually opened up a one-way travel bubble with New Zealand. So New Zealanders can come into Australia quarantine-free, but as of right now, Australians cannot travel to New Zealand quarantine-free. So there is a focus on trying to get that bubble up and running in the next couple of months. Obviously, there's been a couple of very localised cases at the start of the new year, which is proving challenging and kind of progressing those discussions. But we do hope to get that kind of two-week corridor opened up for the Kiwis and Aussies in the next 2 to 3 months, which would be great for both of our countries.
No, absolutely.
For sure, yeah.
Now, our impression is that Australia really has succeeded in slowing the spread of COVID. I know I have talked to some of your countrymen, tour operators down there when there were some outbreaks, let's say in Melbourne. But recently we haven't heard too much, and you've had some success because of this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Australia is definitely held up there in terms of one of the countries that's kind of most successfully managed and contained the pandemic. I was just actually reading the statistics this morning. So in terms of number of cases in Australia since the pandemic started, we've just got under 29,000 and only 909 deaths through the whole pandemic.
That's amazing.
So
yeah.
If you compare that to what we're experiencing here, it's obviously quite a different story. As you say, we have had a couple of local outbreaks in various parts of the country over the past 3 to 4 months, but the systems and protocols that we have in place in Australia by all various state governments have really successfully contained those and nip them in the bud really, really quickly. So as of today, we actually haven't had any community transmission in Australia for the last 10 days since the last reported case. So everyone's really happy about that. So our systems and protocols are definitely working, and making sure that we continue to keep the country and the population safe.
No, that's great news. Now, are there any projected opening dates for Australia, or are we just going to have to worry here? We have to get all vaccinated before we can go.
Yeah, I think I wish I could answer that question, because I'd be a rich man if I could answer that question for everyone. But yeah, at the moment, there's no published. The government hasn't published any pathway for broader opening of international borders. I think what they have said is that the vaccination is going to be key to support that opening. The great thing in Australia is that they announced a couple of days ago that they've now approved the first vaccination for use in Australia, which is the Pfizer vaccine, and they expect deliveries of that by mid-February, and vaccination to start rolling out from mid to late February. So I think for the country, I think that's really exciting, and I think we're all eagerly waiting to see how that vaccination program rolls out in Australia, and what impact that has on the ability to open international borders. Based on what we know today, I think it's unlikely that we'd see any broader opening of our borders, particularly for a market like the US and Canada, anytime before kind of towards the end of this year and possibly into next year. But as I say, we don't have the specific guidance at this time, but I think we all remain hopeful that with the acceleration of vaccination programs, not just in Australia, but also here, that as that accelerates, that might cause a shift in perspective and thinking.
Yeah, well, hopefully we're now being told that everyone will mostly be vaccinated by the end of the summer, beginning of the fall. So those that don't want to. So clearly that's something that would be good and might cause Australia to think again about letting us in. I mean, dude, you kept us out. And now what your job is, and I was going to ask you that next, is what has Tourism Australia been doing over the past year to keep kind of interest in the country high? I mean, boy, if you're trying to develop pent-up demand, I think you're doing a good job.
Yeah, for sure. I think the great thing that we have little confidence in, James, as I'm sure you're hearing from other destinations, is that there's a huge amount of pent-up demand out there. So we have full confidence that when our borders do open again, that people will come back and come back quickly and come back in a big way. So we kind of have full confidence in that. We took the perspective very early on that we felt it was very important that we kept our destination present for both consumers and our valued travel advisor partners in market. So just quickly from a consumer perspective, we've had an ongoing program of what we call content amplification over the past 9 months. So we've been developing specific pieces of content that kind of talk and lean into all the specific wonderful things that we like to position ourselves in Australia, and why Australia is a different destination to others, and making sure that we keep that content in front of our target consumer audience so they remain connected to Australia, but more importantly inspired, and helping them to keep that dream alive, so that when they do come to start to more actively plan, that Australia is top of mind for them. And for our advisor community, we've been doing a very similar program of work. So again, we felt it's been very important to make sure that advisors keep their knowledge up on Destination Australia, and make sure they can keep connected to our destination, make sure they understand what's going on as well. So we had an ongoing program of education and advocacy, primarily leveraging our Destination Specialist program, which is the Aussie Specialist program.
Of course, the famous one.
Many people will be part of our Aussie Specialist program. So we've been doing weekly webinars there. We continue to send out our weekly emails. We continue to run prizes and incentives. So that's the real key platform for us. And we've looked to do a couple of new initiatives there again, just to help Australia stand out. So towards the end of last year, we sent out some crosswords, some colouring pictures for folks who have kids to help them get engaged and think about Australia as well. And then just laterally, towards the end of last year, we also launched a new Facebook channel for our advisors as well. And that was really on the basis that we understand that many advisors aren't necessarily working full time at the moment, so don't have as much time necessarily to keep engaged. And when they are working, they want to be making sure they're talking to their clients. So we launched a Facebook channel as an additional way to keep communicating in a much more passive way, in a much more easily consumable way, all of our key messages and updates to the advisor community. So we found that really successful. The engagement's been really, really strong, and we just continue to see that grow.
Now, what is the Facebook URL for that one? I mean, the end of it obviously is facebook.com, but
yeah, so it's not actually an open Facebook channel, so it's a closed user group. So once you become a part of our Aussie specialist community, so once you sign up as a trainee or become qualified, then you can have access to that group, and we approve you that way. So,
well, the other thing you've done, obviously, travel is going to be different this year and next. And I believe you've identified some sort of projected trends in the market. And I wanted to go over some of these trends with you sort of one by one. And the first trend I think you're talking about is that travelers will be looking to visit sort of naturally wide open and remote destinations they deem safe. And of course, we know, Australia's just packed. I mean, there's just absolutely no room, right? It's just, I mean, I have been there and there's no people actually most of the time. There's just these wide open spaces, which is absolutely would meet this trend. Talk a little bit about that and why Australia would be kind of be a natural destination to meet this trend.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this is a really interesting trend because I think, the longer the pandemic's been going on and the longer distancing measures have been in place, I think people have become accustomed and almost conditioned to the fact that they have to be distanced from people and they need to be outside and away from crowds. So I think because of that, people will be leaning into that type of comfort level in terms of what they want to experience in a destination. And Australia is a large country. One of the things that we often talk about to our advisor community in terms of how to educate their customers on Australia, firstly, we talk about the size of the country. So Australia geographically is the same size approximately to the continental US. So that just puts into perspective the scale of the country from a geographic perspective. And then we put that with the fact that we only have a population of 25 to 30 million. So if you think of the differences between the US and Australia, we have a geography of similar nature, but we have a population of 1/10 of the size. Right. So right away you get a really clear picture of the relativity of the population mass in the country. Is the first thing. But as you say, as you can see behind me, we just have such a vast array of amazing, untouched, beautiful landscapes that people can almost in many circumstances explore quite freely and without interruption from anywhere else. There's just so much room for everyone down there. We've got amazing national parks right across the country that are awesome. Last year I was down in Tasmania and went to the Cradle Mountain National Park, which was just phenomenal and spectacular. So there's just so many examples of those like outdoor experiences, those wide open spaces that people might not first think about as a reason to go to Australia, but once you dig under the surface, there's just so much out there.
No, absolutely. Although I got to tell you, in your picture behind you, there are actually 3 people on that sandbar. That's way too many people.
I know. There's too many people on there, right?
I think I want to have my own sandbar. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the second trend, which is sort of safety. We think these days everything is health and safety. And how does Australia rank in terms of being a safe destination, especially these days when, as I said, being safe is so intertwined with being healthy?
Yeah, that's right. Safety pre-pandemic, safety has always been, a really strong consideration for any traveller, depending on which destination they're going to. And Australia's always ranked really highly. Think about the context of safety pre-pandemic. We are a relatively benign nation from a political perspective. We don't ruffle any feathers politically with any country. So from that perspective, relatively safe in that context. But of course, the context of safety now is much more health focused.
Right.
And I think we talked earlier about how well Australia has handled the pandemic. So that's a real key foundation in terms of allowing people to feel safe. Australia's handled it so well. So the perception of exposure to health risk in Australia is very strong in terms of that being quite low in the country. We do a lot of research, as do many destinations, and our most recent research has actually told us that in the US, 82% of travelers in the US have that perception of Australia being a safe destination to travel to, and 70% in Canada. So those statistics are really strong for us. And also in terms of how Australia ranks against other destinations as well, Australia continues to sit on top in terms of the perception of safety relative to other destinations too.
No, and I've been there, and it's one of the most safest destinations I've ever been to, and I've been to many of your major cities, and it is a wonderful country. And now with the added question of health being part of that safe, and obviously this reputation that Australia has right now as being one of the safest and healthiest countries is going to serve you well in the coming year when everybody wants to start traveling there. Now, let's talk about the third trend, which is you found that the travelers are really interested now in travel as a force for good. And how does Australia match up to this trend, and how can travelers experience travel as a force for good in Australia?
Yes, and this is another fascinating trend. I think as a result of the pandemic, people have really had the opportunity to step back and kind of question their motivations for many things, and motivation for travel, and the impact of travel on everyone's environment, I think, has been a key consideration for people. So travel as a force for good is a big trend for us that we identify. And I think for a destination like Australia, the way we think about it is how we can bring forth experiences to customers where, if they choose to, they can participate in opportunities to either give back to the community or give back to the land, and really kind of balance out their impact of their travel. So there's a couple of things that we think about in that regard. So one is environmental impact. So one of the strong examples that we always consider is one of our flagship properties in Australia, which is the Emirates Walgan Valley One and Only Resort. They were the first awarded eco-friendly carbon neutral hotel in the world. So that's a really strong example of how you can participate in an accommodation experience that's being built around providing a neutral impact to the environment. So that's one example. Really core examples for us as well. As you all know, this time last year we were talking to everyone about bushfires and the impact.
Oh, right. Yes, I know. That was a great crisis. Yeah.
Yeah. So as a result of that, there's lots of opportunities for guests when they can come down to Australia, hopefully sooner rather than later, where they can come and experience products where they can help some of the regeneration of our wildlife. So zoos like Taronga Zoo in Sydney have a strong conservation program focused on supporting the restoration of the wildlife populations, and clients can have the opportunity to come down, see what they're up to, and in some circumstances participate in what they're doing. We have another great operator, Echidna Walkabout, and a real core part of what they do is providing opportunities for guests and clients to give back to the community and the land. So one of the tiny examples of what you can do with those folks is you can go tree planting, which helps support the regeneration of the land there. So they're just a couple of examples, and I think when we start to more heavily talk about Australia in the future, we'll be bringing these experiences to the fore so that advisors can understand what they can offer to their clients in that regard.
No, and I'm sure you mentioned several examples of that I'm aware of. The resort, obviously, up in the Blue Mountains. I've long wanted to go there. I didn't quite get there last time, but hopefully next time. It was wonderful. But there's all these other things. And another trend that I've experienced over there is that people have a greater interest in Indigenous cultures and experiences. And obviously, Australia offers these experiences in terms of its Aboriginal culture and more. Talk a little bit about how travelers can experience this. I know you have a whole range of travel and tourism experiences, companies and hotels and tours that are owned by Aboriginal people, and really giving you a great exposure to their culture.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I think that this is another trend. I think that was starting to come to the fore, even pre-pandemic. I remember attending a Virtuoso conference in 2019, I guess it was the last
you and me both. We were both there, I think, at that time.
Yeah, and that was one of the trends that they talked about at that time. But I think at the moment it's really coming into the fore, and it's really connected with the previous trend that I was talking about. When people travel now, they really want to understand more about the local culture, the local people, particularly in a destination like Australia. You know, we have the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We have the oldest living cultural and the oldest living culture in the world of, you know, over 60,000 years. And
right.
As you were mentioning, James, a few years ago, we recognised an opportunity in this space, but also recognised the opportunity that as a tourism industry, it's important that we support the Indigenous folks and support their businesses and bring them forth in terms of how guests can really experience the realness of Australia. So we created a program called the Discover Aboriginal Experiences of Australia. So this is really a one-stop shop for the key Aboriginal tourism experiences that you can have in Australia, and they range from guided walks around Sydney through to learning about the local arts, how to make Aboriginal art, learning about the rainforest, learning about the connection to people and land. So there's some really interesting immersive experiences in there. There's over 170 tourism experiences in there that guests can really lean into if they want to get under the skin of our Indigenous culture and take some of that experience as part of their trip down to Australia.
No, it's a fascinating culture, and it's something you have readily available. And I saw that, as you said, I saw evidence of that at Virtuoso and previous promotional programs that you've had talking about that, because it's not something that I think Americans think about right away, but these days they're considering it much more in terms of what they want to see. Now, the fifth trend is an interesting one, especially during these times, is travel as something to regenerate, retool, whatever, which, you know, and we don't need any of that after this year. I tell you, we need this. And talk a little bit about how Australia can deliver on this trend, you know, with it, whether it's adventure experiences, soft adventure experiences, things to sort of get your mind back in gear. I mean, this is a crazy time.
Yeah, no, it's another great trend for us. I think, you know, as we all know, I think, you know, we've kind of been forced to kind of take a stop and a standstill for a little while, and we've almost all been forced to kind of take time and regenerate. And I think as a result of that, good chunks of the traveling population have really learned a new appreciation for that opportunity to regenerate. You know, I think people's motivations for taking a vacation are very different, but I think this trend is really going to come through to the fore. From an Australia perspective, I think there's just an abundance of ways that you can do that. You know, some people's way of regenerating is sitting somewhere like behind me here, and others like a little bit more active. So again, you know, one of the things that we point people into from a soft adventure perspective is a group called the Great Walks of Australia. So, you know, some amazing hikes and walks right across the country where people can go for day hikes. They can go for 5-day hikes if they want to. There's just an abundance of things in there. So that's just one tiny example. But then you've also got at the other end of the spectrum, we've also got some, you know, amazing properties in Australia. We've got the Luxury Lodges of Australia collection that are often out in more remote parts of the country where, you know, you're really having the opportunity to kind of switch off from everyday life. Sure. Many of these properties have wonderful spa experiences at them as well. So if that's the way you like to regenerate and recharge, then that's where you go. You know, so I think the key point here is really that people choose to regenerate in different ways, and I think what we talk about in Australia is the diversity of what we can offer depending on the way that you choose to regenerate and take that time out. Yeah.
Well, for me, I mean, I regenerated by going to see some Australian rules football when I was out in Melbourne, actually, which was fascinating game to do. And that's the kind of thing I kind of like to do and just forget about things for a while, trying to figure out a game I've never seen except on ESPN late at night.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting way. And then I did the spa thing too. So there are an awful lot of ways to do this. And I'm sure you can provide travel advisors a whole list of things they can interest their clients in. And let's talk about that for a second. Right now, for travel advisors interested in selling Australia today and really getting their clients getting ready for them to travel to the country, hopefully later this year or early next year, what should travel advisors be doing right now?
Yeah, so I think I think one of the things that we've been hearing, particularly since the start of the new year, is that people are more actively starting to plan again. So we obviously hope that people are starting to consider Australia more actively. We know it's not as easy for Australia right now because we don't have that clear timeline on when our borders are going to open. I think for advisors, there's a whole range of resources that they can use. So from a Tourism Australia perspective, the main resource really is our Aussie Specialist program. So if anyone's out there not part of our Aussie Specialist program, we'd recommend that you go to aussiespecialist.com, register, and then there's a whole training program in there that we're just actually in the process of looking to update and add some new training modules in there. So an abundance of resources, itineraries, training modules, and then you get access to all of our regular communication and training webinars as well. So that would be the core resource from a Tourism Australia perspective. Sure. From a COVID-specific perspective, we also have this great COVID-safe travel portal, which is on australia.com, which is our consumer-facing website. When you go on there, there's a ribbon at the top, which will point you straight into it. That's the best resource to understand the most current information in regards to travelling safely to and within Australia. So it talks about the various state restrictions that might be in place. It talks about general protocols for transport, restaurants, bars, all of those things. So that's a great resource for understanding what's happening on the ground in Australia from a restrictions perspective and how the tourism sector is operating safely at the moment. Obviously, when our international borders begin to reopen, that will become a more important resource, particularly for advisors here. So we make the most recent and up-to-date protocols around how people will be able to travel safely there. And then the third resource for advisors really is our key wholesale partners that everyone works with for Australia, and anyone that does work with a DMC or ITO that's based in Australia as well. They're also great resources for assisting with travel planning, understanding what's going on in Australia, and providing some guidance around how best to kind of navigate that uncertainty at the moment. I think we're in a fortunate position where many clients are able to book with flexibility at the moment. So if they have that flexibility in terms of timing, if we're looking at a particular timing and it doesn't quite work out for that, there's flexibility there to change to different time frames. So I think there's lots out there for everyone to take advantage of.
No, that's great. And my next question was going to talk about the resources, but you've already listed a lot of the great resources that travel advisors can do and work on. Become an Aussie specialist. I mean, we've heard about this program for quite literally a couple of decades now. It was one of the first and most popular specialist programs that travel advisors ever had access to. And now it's getting improved and you're adding to it and there's much more to do. And hey, you have the time to do it now. So at least for a little while, so you can become an Aussie specialist and then really get to understand and be ready to go down there to experience it yourself. So that's always good advice. Now, is there anything else you want to tell our 75,000 travel advisors out there about Australia right now, the trends that we've talked about, and what's to come?
No, I don't think so. I think one thing I just finished with, I think I can imagine people are frustrated out there that, Australia isn't open, you can't send your clients at the moment. But I think, for all the reasons that we talked about at the beginning, we have such a focus on Australia and making sure that the population's safe. And I think that will really stand us as a tourism destination on a really strong footing when we do open. We want to make sure that we are a safe destination, people can travel there safely, and we don't want to jeopardize that kind of core health and safety message. So whilst it's frustrating, and it's frustrating for us too, I think just be patient for a little while longer, I think, and we will get there, and we will open. And Australia has and continue to has just such an amazing quality of tourism experience out there for everyone to come and experience. So all of our operators are eager and waiting to welcome back guests from North America at the point in time when we can do so.
Well, I am eager to get back there too. I've been there sadly only twice in my life, but I loved both times, and I'm eager to get back again because I've only explored a little bit of the country, and I've seen two of the major cities, Sydney and Melbourne, but I have to get up north and really do the Great Barrier Reef and get out to Perth, and I haven't done Ayers Rock or any of that. There's so much more to see, and I am I really enjoyed it, and I really hope to go back soon. Now, Chris, I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with us and speak with our audience. I know there are an awful lot of travel advisors who are eager to get back booking Australia as soon as they can, and hopefully this will be useful to them in the future.
That's awesome. James, thank you so much.
I'm James Shillinglaw, and this is Insider Travel Report.